Hey there, I'm Pia, and welcome to another episode of In My Own Words, brought to you by Common Sense and Ridiculous. On these podcasts, we have real conversations with a lot of different people, and hopefully, we will benefit our communities like Manchester, where this podcast was born. Today's episode is called Who They Think We Should Be. I'm very excited to be joined by Torrin Andrews. We've spoken on these issues before, and I'm hoping that our conversation just brings a lot of light to your day and a lot of thought. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting into it. So, Torrin, how are you?
Hello. I'm good, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and just talking about some pretty interesting topics from what I've been told anyway. I'm glad to kind of just get into it and yeah, just hopefully do something that's good.
Very interesting. Like we've had, just to set the context, we've had a few conversations about this before, and our opinions are always so almost like in sync with one another with how we see the world and stuff. And we sort of just want to get it across, I think, just to see what your thoughts are as well, like just the audience and stuff, because I think it's always nice, like when people come together and share like religious conversations, because I think there's so little of it nowadays because it's such a taboo subject almost.
Yeah.
But today should be very good. So like I said, our main issue that we're talking about today is religion. And how do you pick what group identity you belong to, really? And what does religion play in who you are? So, Torrin, if you just want to give everyone a little bit of a background as to your religious group, how you got there, just like an overview.
So firstly, just a bit about myself. As you said, my name is Torrin, and I'm currently in Fallowfields in Manchester at the moment. Studying at university and all those sort of things. But yeah, in terms of religion, I am a Christian. I've been on that journey for a while now. I grew up in a Christian household. My dad's actually a pastor of a church and all these sort of things. So yeah, religion has always been a part of my life. It's always been something that I've identified with, and it's been a very strong foundation in a lot of stuff I do. I've been surrounded by a lot of different people and a lot of different religions though, and it's nice to kind of have these conversations with people that don't necessarily agree with you but have a different perspective. But with something that's so, I guess, big and profound as religion is literally defines your way of life. So I just like my perspective, and from this perspective that I'm a Christian, and yeah, just following those teachings.
Yeah. You were from Fallon is quite diverse there. Like, would you say that being there, you've spoken to a lot of people that have quite different opinions on religion, or are there a lot of like atheists, or would you say that you found like almost like your people there?
I think, well, with Fallowfields, it's quite diverse in the sense that it's a uni area. It's quite a lot of like students here, and it's people from all over the country. Do you know what I mean? So you're definitely not stuck to your one type of group that you're kind of used to, maybe. So even in my house alone, there's a Christian, there's a ex-Muslim, there's a Muslim, there's an atheist. You know what I mean? There's such a plethora of different religions going on. You've got that perspective. But I think one of the things I like about, I guess, the area that I'm in and, the people that I'm around is you don't really get that necessarily that conflict. It's more of a thing of trying to understand and seeing how people have different ways of life and what they think is very interesting in that sense. So yeah, it's quite nice to kind of grow off of it.
I was going to say, because one of the things that we really want to bring to light in this podcast is to talk about hateful extremism and almost to have those real tough discussions on how certain communities, certain like groups of people, how they almost become separate from the rest of the country around them and things like that. And I think one thing we wanted to bring in religion and what we wanted to discuss is how I think we just want a real conversation on how these religious groups do differ, but also how we can bring them together and like start to create those like open conversations with each other.
Yeah.
I mean, I should have mentioned at the beginning to everyone, I'm a Hindu. I wouldn't say I'm the most religious person, but I do like to follow certain things in like almost like my scriptures, and I do go to temple, and I think religion does bring almost like a calm within me. I think I'm becoming almost more religious now than I was before, but I think everybody has their own journey with that.
Yeah.
But on the topic of that, there's a lot of controversy around Hinduism right now. If anyone knows anything about India and what's going on, like this whole Hindu nationalism. And I think it really got me thinking about how much conflict there is between religious groups, really.
Yeah.
And
to say the least.
Honestly, and one of the things we were talking about earlier, me and Torrin, before we actually started filming this, is we were talking about like Christianity and like how that differs from other Abrahamic religions and just other religious groups in general. And how you yourself or like people around you have dealt with that conflict.
Yeah. It's very interesting because I think, as I said, one of the major things that kind of stood out to me the most is having so many influences and so many different religions around me, and even just having conversations for example, with my Muslim friend. We kind of have a lot of similar views up until a certain point. For those that don't know, a lot of the Quran is literally the Old Testament in the Bible. So up until a certain point, there's a thing where there's that agreement, but there's also so much differences. And I think one of the things is, you see a lot of stuff in social media and, just going on in the world. There's a lot of viewpoints that are pushed by the media that kind of contribute to this hateful extremism. You're looking at things with Islam in terms of like terrorism and all these sort of things. But then one of the things is that I've noticed a lot is, as much as there's the differences within the religion, the way that the world kind of views religion in general is that, it's that whole idea of, oh, we're not liberal enough and we don't allow for people to be free. So we've got this idea that the media pushes on Islam in the sense of there's this terrorism and all this sort of stuff. But then there's also this idea on Christianity that we don't care and love for like homosexuals and that sort of stuff. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's weird in the sense of, firstly, there's the inner hatred or I guess conflict between religions.
Yeah.
But there's also the outer conflict with the world and how that causes another sense of conflict and extremism. And it's kind of navigating that. And I guess the question is, how do you get through that? How do we solve that? And what's the actual aim that we're looking for? Do you know what I mean?
I think the biggest issue that I found, I don't know if you'll agree with me on this, but like is the stereotypes. So one thing that, if my listeners are, I'm not sure if they have any understanding of this, but there is a big conflict between like Muslims and Hindus, and that is brought about by a lot of different factors. You could bring in like partition, you can bring in colonialism, you can bring in just a lot of different things, but the end result is that there is a lot of animosity between those two religious groups. And I know myself, being raised as a Hindu, there are certain stereotypes that my community have had towards certain Muslims. But even if I speak to my Muslim friends, they'll have certain stereotypes about Hindus or Sikhs or like just groups in general. And I think that conflict, we've been able to come together in university, like even in school, we're able to overcome that. But I think it's when you grow older that maybe those almost that the stereotypes grow a little bit bigger, in a sense, like it grows a little bit more, because that's when you're starting your adult life.
How did those sort of stereotypes between the two religions come about?
I think I'm not an expert on this. I would put a lot of it down to partition, because that was when India and Pakistan did separate. So that was when you had your land for like mostly who Muslims would reside in. You had India, which is where mostly Hindus and Sikhs would reside in. And I think that physical barrier is such, separating those two groups, that caused a massive change. And I think going back to the religious thing, it's just it's an understatement to say that obviously the two religions don't agree. And I think that picking little bits of what we've seen in the media, or like, because we don't have a full understanding of each other's religions, same as Christianity, same as I know that there is a certain animosity between like Judaism and Islam, and even like Christianity brought into that. And I think the one thing that really puts fuel into the fire is social media and like what we read online and the way things are reported, I think. And I think that that's what fuels a lot of these segregations, and we haven't taken the time to actually speak to members of those communities to say, okay, right, what is your religion about? Like, what is it that you get from it? What part does it play in your life? I'm sure that if you did, you know, you'd learn more. And I'm not sure, I'm sure you agree with that, really, from what you've said, like speaking to fellow university students in fallow fields, in university, and like, you know, in central Manchester as well. Like, I'm sure that that's brought a certain new light to your life.
Yeah, definitely. I think the idea of location and I guess culture plays a huge part in this, you know, identifying with a religion. Like, I think in terms of like the Islam and Christianity debate, it's similar in a sense what you were saying about Islam and kind of Hinduism in terms of like the partition. Because I think if you look at the Western culture, you're looking at about like 32 million people that are identifying as a Christian now. As time goes on, we've seen a lot of people from the east side of the world coming into the UK and other Western cultures. And now it's like, we're getting this mix of religion and mix of identities. And we're kind of like, yeah, nah, that's not me. Do you know what I mean? There's that element of, we just don't know what you're about. Do you know what I mean? I think the issue is people are seeing it more as a, I guess, threat rather than being like, okay, so talk to me about what you believe. Talk to me what, you know, you actually think life is about in terms of your religious walk and stuff. And I think even in terms of, as you were saying with Islam and Hinduism, it causes conflict. And it's kind of like, at what point do we sit down and have that conversation? And that's why I'm blessed to be in this situation, having this conversation now, because it's bringing these things to, I guess, the light. And it's hopefully just hoping that people over time, especially with social media and all these sort of things, the accessibility to have these conversations are way more available. Do you know what I mean? So I personally feel like a way to sort of actually get through to solving this issue is not even necessarily being like everyone convert to one religion, everyone believe the same thing, but it's like at the end of the day, we're being exposed to a lot more religions and a lot more views. So now let's talk about it. Let's see why you believe what you believe, and let's come to a conclusion. Do you know what I mean?
It was crazy because I was actually researching the percentage of Christians in the UK as opposed to, you know, other religions and ethnic minority groups, and it came up with that 53.6% of the UK are Christian, which doesn't surprise me, because I think we always forget, especially like you being in a diverse area in Manchester, you always forget actually how, like, white our country is. And, you know, like, we forget because we're in diverse areas, like I over to uni up north, and I'm in very diverse areas, so you almost forget. But then I was researching in Manchester, the percentage of Christians, and it's 48.7%, which is a very, very large makeup. And I think when you think about it in your head, like how many people there are that, you know, that might think like you, but then even within that, there's different conflicts, I think. And I don't want to keep banging on about conflict, because I know there's a lot of unity within this as well. But I think just to think about it in your head, like how many different kinds of people that, you know, are following the same thing as you. And I think it even
goes down to like denominations in Christianity. Like that's its own sort of you know, kind of break down that deep, but you know what I mean? It's sort of, I think one of the biggest things that I think about religion in general is, firstly, in terms of identity and how that can, you know, control how you view yourself. It really goes down to, at the end of the day, in all religions, the core principles is to be a good person, to be kind to other people, to you know, be kind to the person that is suffering. And I think that's the main outlook that I kind of, in terms of my identity and what I do, that's the main thing that I want to put forward. I don't want to be like, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, that means I only identify with other Christians. No, at the end of the day, the Christian story and the Christian, you know, messages love everyone. Do you know what I mean? No, regardless if you don't believe what I believe. However, I'm here if you need me. I'm here if you need like that love and that support, and hopefully that can bring you to the same belief that I have. However, if not, at least I've given that outlook of love. Do you know what I mean? So it's one of them ones. I think at the core, we need to look at what is actually religion about, regardless of whether the beliefs are the same. Do you know what I mean?
True. And what you said then about everybody having the same sort of like like almost like morals, values, things like that, it is all the same if you look at it. Even if you look at, like, I know this is a bit like far-fetched in terms of the religious route, but like cults, religious cults, let's say, everybody has the same sort of thinking and understanding that, you know, they want to give love to the Lord, and, you know, they just want to do as well as they can here on earth and things like that. And I think sometimes we forget that really our core principles, most of them, if you strip everything back and just think about your relationship with God, most of it is just the very same. Like me speaking to like my Muslim friends, even like my friends of friends that are like that follow Judaism, it's all, you know, going back to that whole, they just want to be a good person, and they just want to, like, you know, give themselves to God and like spread his gospel and his word. But at the end of the day, it's all to do with love. And I think, you know, like often we do forget that. I think one question I wanted to ask you especially, and what I wanted to, you know, the listeners, is like, what part does religion play in who you are? Like, would you say, and how do you think it relates to everybody else's religious journey?
Yeah. I guess the only way that I could answer this question is, at the end of the day, in Christianity, one of the main principles is trying to follow the life of Jesus, and his, of course, he was seen as one of the only perfect people. So the way that I kind of relate that to me is not striving to be perfect, but striving to be progressing. Do you know what I mean? And striving to be a person that can reflect that love, as I said earlier, and being a safe haven for people to look at me and being like, you know what, that's a type of person I want to be around. And when they see that, they'll be like, why are you like this? And I can, you know, put that back and show it's because of God, you know what I mean, and because of the religion that I follow. So I think in terms of that, what the biggest part for me, what Christianity plays is, firstly, it brings me that peace, and it brings me that, you know, that joy in knowing that there is that thing that I believe in, but it also just defines my character in terms of my integrity, my humility, and it gives me an outline to look at and be like, okay, this is what I want to live my life by, and the standards I want to uphold. Now let me try and do it. Do you know what I mean? I don't necessarily see it as you know, this community, this is my people. Do you know what I mean? Because that goes against the teachings. It's not about sticking to your community. It's about being open with people and bringing people in and being loving and caring and kind. And I think that's basically what I'm really trying to build within myself, so that it's almost normal, because it's really not. We see so much hatred and so much opposition with people in the world. And I guess it's just down to this individualism that we all have. But the idea of now coming together and building a community as everyone in the world, not just a Christian or as a Muslim or a Hindu, do you know what I mean? I think that's definitely the path that I'm on at the moment.
Do you, I was thinking more about, in general, about what part it plays in your decisions and choices. And I was going to ask, do you think that yourself being from that community and like having friends, like, do you think that it plays a big part in how you think about yourself? I think it was also, sorry, I wanted to touch on, you said that there's an ex-Muslim in your house. Was religion, like, did they think it was separate from how was you know, the rules and stuff that they didn't particularly maybe want to follow?
Say that again.
Was it like the rules that they may have like not particularly wanted to follow, or do you think that they just didn't see themselves in that religion, and like they didn't think that religion affected how they like thought or like about themselves? And like they didn't consider it like an identity, because I know that a lot of people do consider it as like, you know, their foremost identity.
Yeah. Based on the conversations that we've had, it's definitely been a thing from what I can tell. You know, growing up in a certain religion, you're kind of just force-fed what it is. But sometimes as you get into this age now, like 21, 22, 23, this is when you really have to start making it your own or turning away from it. Do you know what I mean? And I think based on his own personal experiences and, you know, knowledge of the world, he for him, it made sense that it didn't make sense. Do you know what I mean? I think that's kind of the journeys that he's on at the moment. And I guess that's just the way it is in terms of that. I just still feel like in terms of his identity, it's like, you know what, I've been brought up from this household, but it's not something that I relate to anymore. And he's changed a lot in the sense of, you know, the things that he believes and the actions that he takes. But again, it's not a thing where it's like, oh, you're wrong or I'm right. It's like, okay, that's what you define yourself as, and that's how you portray yourself to the world, and that's perfectly fine. Do you know what I mean?
In terms of like we were going on about like hate and like the almost like the terror that we have seen from you know like the media and even just stereotypes from these religious groups. What do you think we can do as, you know, individual communities to overcome this, like this hate, this segregation for one another, this separation? Because it's really hard. It's really hard when your community, your group thinks you're right and that's it, and you don't have space to have free thinking, like thoughts to say, actually, you know what, I agree with aspects of this religion or that religion. And I was just wondering what you yourself think as a community you could do to like overcome this.
I think based on my own personal experience, being a Christian and stuff, I think one of the hardest things for me is, you know, I don't want to say misinformation, but I guess the narrative that's sort of played sometimes on the things that we believe. So, for example, the conflict that, and it sometimes leads to conflict. So, for example, as I said earlier, with the views that we have on homosexuality and the views that we have on women or those sort of things, I think the way that it's portrayed and the way that people understand these things, it leads to people feeling like, okay, yeah, at least some sort of hatred and some sort of like, you know, opposition. But in reality, if we still sat down and have a conversation, be like, this is what we believe, this is why we believe it, and realize that it's coming from a place of love and it's not saying that you're wrong. If anything, it's saying that I have no right to judge you at all. Do you know what I mean? And it's led to such crazy things in the media, or even when homosexuality became legalized as marriage, there was this huge kind of battle against the Church of England and
upset.
You know what I mean? And it's like, this isn't what we want. This isn't the way that it's supposed to be. But it's not even from you know, the actual beliefs that we had. It's from the way there's been lack of communication and it's become opposition, and now it's led to the conflict. So I think the main thing that we can have across all the religions and all the different principles and beliefs is a conversation. And I think during this whole 2020 year where everyone's just at home doing nothing, I think this is the perfect time to, if you look at the Black Lives Matter and stuff like that, people are finally having a conversation. People are finally being able to say their views, and we're seeing a lot more people understand where that idea is coming from. So I guess even with Christianity and Islam and stuff like that, it's having a conversation and being like, okay, look, I don't understand, but what do you believe? And I think that's what's going to change the...
just to be open with it, I think, as well. Just to, you know, go in with no judgment, none of your previous thoughts on what you... I think last year when I was in my second year of university, I lived in a house with 3 other girls, and on first look at us, you might think, oh, just 4 brown girls, you know, living together. But actually, we had one girl who identified with her religious group as being a Buddhist. We had one Sikh, we had a Muslim, and then we had me, a Hindu. So if you look at it like that, you know, we are very diverse. And we had conversations about our thinking, about what we wanted from life, and about how almost like how we go about life, you know, what religion means to us. And again, like, even though we did have certain, you know, setbacks with how we thought about each other based on almost like family, ancestry, communities, things like that, I think we did reach the same conclusion that each religion is beautiful in our own way. I think speaking about it with passion and love, I think when someone speaks about your own, like their own religion with passion and love, you feel that. And then you almost think, oh, you know what? I understand with that. Because it's like me, I've heard a lot about Islam. I've like most of my friends, like they speak to me about it, and we have like lighthearted discussions about it. And from that, I could see how beautiful their religion is and what they want from each other in life. And like speaking about even their festivities like Eid and Ramadan and things like that, like it was such a nice, caring, giving time. And that's the sort of stuff you don't see in the media. Like being in uni and seeing the Islamic society come up and give food after every like day in Ramadan in the night. And it was like a really beautiful thing. Like not even the community, but the students got together, and it was nice to see that. And like I said, it's something that isn't really going to be reported because it's not, it's not following a certain narrative.
Yeah.
And even sorry, just to go back, even Judaism, I remember when I was traveling with my friend and we went to Budapest, and we went to, I think it was in Europe, the second largest Orthodox synagogue. And the information they gave us on their religion and what they think and their traditions, it's so thoughtful.
Yeah.
And you couldn't help but appreciate it.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
And I think that's the main thing, like you said, having these open discussions to speak about it. I think you understand the beauty in each other. Like the stereotypes that you had, like they fall back a little bit. You sort of just see what their thoughts are, and like you immerse yourself in their thinking.
Yeah. I think it definitely takes, I think one of the strongest things that causes us to not be able to have these conversations, it comes down to pride at the end of the day. It's the idea of, I am right, so why am I going to bother? But having these conversations doesn't mean that you're wrong. It just means you're becoming educated. And I think in terms of any sort of subject across the board, whether it's racism, whether it's veganism versus being a meat eater, is being educated enough to have the conversation and being like, okay, yeah, I still believe what I believe, but I'm glad that I know what you know now, and I understand why you believe what you believe. So I think the ways to sort of actually make progress to change is firstly a mindset shift of, well, that's a tongue twister. a mindset shift of taking away that pride and being like, you know what, me having this conversation doesn't mean I believe what you believe, but it's giving you the time to explain it to me and become educated. And then it's also, again, the action that follows of having these conversations. And we live in such a melting pot of different cultures and different religions that it's out our access, you know what I mean? Whenever we want it, whether it's on social media or just people that we meet on the everyday street. As you said, in Manchester, we've got such a high percentage of Christians, but then there's such a mix of ethnicities and religions that go around, and it's kind of taking that step to be like, you know what, explain it to me. And hopefully that will just kind of lead to a place of change.
I think not to be afraid as well when you see these religious groups. Like I know in Manchester that there are lots of communities that are together in certain areas, and it's to feel like, it's not to segregate that, to be like, oh, that area is, associated with this group of people or this community or whatever. I think almost when you have that first thought, it's automatically like, okay, they're them, we're us. And I think that's when you get that, those like barriers in between, and then these conversations aren't open. But if you go there and you speak to people, you'll see that everybody's just, just wanting the same thing, just like light-hearted conversation. It doesn't have to be an argument all the time. It doesn't have to be like serious, like conversation. It doesn't have to be that someone's trying to sway you to like, join their side, join their group or whatever. I think that's sometimes what we think when you have these conversations. Really quickly on our title, because I did say that our title was Who They Think We Should Be. And I know we are at the end of our session, but I wanted to ask you, do you think that you have to act a certain way because you are associated with a certain religious group? Do you think that, people want you to be someone specific? Your Christian community want you to be someone, and do you feel like that's affected you in like your identity?
That's actually a really good question. I wouldn't say
sorry, really quickly, not to interrupt, but well, I did, but sorry to interrupt. I should say most as well, like, do you think other religious groups see you in a certain way as well? Like, think that you have to, act, be, someone that they have a stereotype of,
Okay, so firstly, like how Christians view me, but then as well how other religions sort of view me. As I said, that's a good question. I think the biggest thing for me is, firstly, there's layers to it, in the sense of, firstly, I am a pastor's kid, so there's this thing in the Christian community called like a PK, which stands for like pastor's kid, and it's so funny because they always say they always say
PK,
that, like, he said that pastors' kids are always the wild ones because they end up like rebelling because, you know, they live their life having to try and be perfect. In the same way, like Obama's kids will probably have a standard to uphold, and you never know what goes on behind closed doors and that sort of stuff. And I think, you know, growing up when I was younger, that was a thing that I felt like, oh, I've got to be this perfect child. I can't do nothing wrong, because at the end of the day, first, it's going to affect how people will view not only my dad, but then the message that he's preaching. And then not only that, but Christianity as well. And there's that responsibility to be like, I am, I guess, a linchpin that's going to showcase Christianity, and I'm only 10 years old. Do you know what I mean? And it's kind of that sort of idea there. But as well as that, I guess in terms of Christianity in general, I feel like if people really listen to the message, they'll understand that you don't have to be perfect. However, it's literally a case of, as long as you're striving to be on that place of being, you know, good and loving, I think that's when I think if Christians are viewing you and being judgmental, then they aren't really following the Christian message the way they should. That's the way that I kind of view it there. So at this moment of getting to understand the teachers a little bit more, I'm more like, it doesn't affect me as much in terms of my identity. I like to just put what I know and what the Bible tells me into action rather than what people's judgments are. But
we live in a very judgmental world. I'll say that again, like with the whole cancel culture, with any little thing you do wrong, that is going to be held against you, really.
Definitely. And then I guess in terms of other religions, I think I get the most pressure from that in terms of my identity and trying to be a certain way, because at the end of the day, they don't understand the message. They don't understand why I believe what I believe. But then it's, even in the Bible, it talks about representing God in a way that it makes people curious and it makes people realize, you know what, that's only God. So the Christian message literally teaches me that I've got to be a certain way so that people from different religions understand or be curious or want to learn. And I think that's the biggest thing for me, is how do I represent God and represent Christianity in a way that's true, firstly, and, you know, just honorable at the same time, that kind of reflects in the way that I am. And I think that's the biggest thing for me, because I'm a human at the end of the day, and I make mistakes and I do things wrong, but it's that idea of, you know, it's a journey and that's okay, but just continuing to strive to be progressing.
I think that was a really beautiful ending to the episode. So I think we'll stop there. Thank you to everyone for listening. Thank you to Torrin for being on the episode today. And I hope you guys really enjoyed it. I hope we hit a lot of marks that you guys wanted to talk about or discuss. Or, you know, I hope we got you thinking about anything, or even if you didn't, it was just a nice listen, I hope. But again, thank you to Torrin for being on the show today.
No worries.
I hope you enjoyed it.
I did indeed.
And we will be back with another episode soon. So see you later, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.